The Ticket for 1217, an original bedtime novel. Stories read by Lilly, Darling. Chapter 1, The Lost Things Office. Moyra Starlight had been having one of those stretches of life when nothing seemed particularly wrong, and yet somehow nothing seemed quite right either. There was no single thing she could point to, no great disaster, no terrible secret. No one particular morning when everything had suddenly changed. Life had simply become a little too quiet. Moyra went to work. She came home. She slept. She woke. She repeated the same small collection of days, each one passing pleasantly enough before becoming another memory, almost indistinguishable from the one before it. And sometimes, while going about her ordinary routines, she would catch herself wondering when exactly her life had become something she had simply been moving through rather than something she was truly living. She didn't dislike her life. That was the strange part. She had a little apartment she liked, a few people she cared about, enough money to get by, and a job that wasn't unpleasant. She worked nights at the Belmore station. The station was old, beautiful, and enormous. Its high glass ceilings turned silver when it rained, and the great clock above the platform 9 had been there longer than anyone Moyra knew could remember. She worked in the Lost Things office. It was a small room tucked beside platform 9 where forgotten things were bought until their owners returned. Moyra liked the job more than she expected she would. There was something comforting about the lost things. A scarf left behind on the train could be found. A book forgotten on a bench could be returned. A child's toy could wait patiently until somebody came looking for it. People were often surprised by how much they missed something once it was gone. Moyra understood that feeling. Not because she had lost anything in particular. At least, she didn't think she had. She simply sometimes wondered whether there was a part of herself she hadn't found yet. Moyra had tried many different things over the years, dabbling here and there, never quite knowing what might truly be hers. Sometimes she wondered if she had a talent at all, something she could do happily, contently, well, and naturally. If only she could find it. And perhaps it was what bothered her the most. She didn't need to be famous. She didn't need anyone to admire her. She only wanted to discover something that felt like it belonged to her. Something she could quietly become good at. Something that made her feel useful. Something that made her think, yes, This is something I was meant to do. But she had stopped expecting that discovery to happen. At least, she had stopped expecting it to happen anytime soon. That evening, rain began falling just after 9. By 11, the station had become almost completely empty. The final commuters hurried through the doors with collars turned against the cold. A train arrived, a train departed, then another, and gradually the station settled into its nighttime quiet. Moira sat behind the lost things desk with a cup of tea between her hands. The clock above platform 9 read 11:48 p.m. She glanced toward the empty platform. Almost midnight. She had always liked that hour. There was something different about a station after midnight. During the day, everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going. They arrived carrying bags and schedules. They checked watches. They hurried towards platforms. They boarded trains. And they disappeared. But after midnight, the station seemed to belong to no one. It was simply there, waiting. Moira understood that too. She finished her tea and stood. There were only a few things to put away from the day's collection. A red scarf, a black umbrella, a paperback novel, a child's mitten, a small leather purse that someone had apparently left beneath the seat. Moira entered each item into the logbook. She placed the purse in its drawer. The umbrella went into the rack. The book went onto the shelf. Then she picked up the mitten. It was tiny, yellow. There was a little blue bird sewn onto the back. Moira smiled. Someone will come back for you. She placed it gently beside the other children's things. Then she heard something. A faint rolling sound. Moira stopped. She listened. Nothing. The rain tapped softly against the glass roof. She returned to her desk. Then, she looked towards the hallway. Another sound. Something was moving. Moira stepped out of the office. The station was empty. She looked towards platform 8. Nothing. Platform 9. Nothing. Then she heard it again. This time from farther down the main corridor. Moira walked toward the sound. She rounded the corner and stopped. A blue suitcase was rolling slowly towards her by itself. Moira stared. The suitcase continued forward. It passed beneath one of the old lamps. It passed the ticket machines. It passed a row of empty wooden benches. Then it reached the intersection near platform 9. For the moment, it seemed to hesitate. Moyra watched. The suitcase turned and continued directly toward the Lost Things office. Moyra followed it. She didn't touch it. She didn't call after it. She simply watched as it rolled along the polished floor, straight towards the office. The door was open. The suitcase rode through, then stopped beside her desk. Moyra stared at it. Slowly, she looked above the doorway. Lost things. She looked back down. Wow. She crouched beside the suitcase. It was beautiful. A deep midnight blue. The kind of blue that seemed almost black in the shadows, but became brighter beneath the station's lights. It had silver corners and 2 small wheels. The handle was tucked neatly away. There was no luggage tag, no name, no address, nothing. Moyra looked around the station. Nobody had followed it. Nobody was hiding beside or behind the pillars. There was simply no one there. She reached for the handle. The moment her fingers touched it, she noticed something strange. The suitcase was warm. Not warm from a radiator, not warm from being held. Warm as though it had been sitting in the sunlight. Moyra gently pulled it further into the office. Then she noticed something else. Rainwater covered the station floor. Her shoes were damp. The umbrella beside her desk dripped steadily onto the mat. But the suitcase was completely dry. Not a single drop of water touched it. Moyra slowly straightened. Where did you come from? The suitcase gave no answer. Of course it didn't, Moyra smiled. That was a silly question. She placed it carefully on the desk. 2 silver clasps held the lid shut. She hesitated. Technically, she shouldn't open someone's luggage. But technically, it had just rolled itself into her Lost Things office. That seemed like a fairly convincing argument. Moyra opened the first clasp, then the second. She lifted the lid. Inside were things unlike anything she expected to find. A folded piece of deep blue cloth, a silver feather, a small glass bottle, a smooth purple stone, a wooden spoon with a tiny 7-petaled flower carved into the handle, a little blue bell, several fine silver threads, and beneath everything else, something flickered. Moira leaned closer. The light disappeared. She blinked. Then it came again. A tiny golden white flicker, almost like a firefly trapped beneath the objects. Moira carefully moved the blue cloth. Nothing. She lifted the feather. Nothing. She moved the bottle. The light disappeared. Then, flicker. There it was again. Moira smiled faintly. All right. Where are you? She moved the purple stone. The light flickered. She reached beneath it. Her fingers touched something thin. Paper. She pulled it out. The moment she lifted it from the suitcase, the glow vanished. Moira looked down. It was a train ticket. An old-fashioned one. Thick, cream-colored paper. The edges were slightly worn. She turned it over. Blink. She turned it back and froze. Written neatly across the top were the words, Moyra Starlight. Moira's smile disappeared. She looked at her name, then at the suitcase, then back at the ticket. No. She checked it again. Perhaps she's read it incorrectly. She hadn't. Her name was there. Below it was today's date, and beneath the date, 12:17 a.m. Moira looked at the station clock. 11:56 p.m. She felt a little strange flutter in her stomach. She read the bottom of the ticket. Platform 9. That was all. There was no destination, no train number, no carriage, and no explanation. Moira turned the ticket over again. Nothing. She looked toward platform 9, then back at the ticket. The clock ticked. 11:57. Moira swallowed. 20 minutes. She didn't know why she said it out loud. Perhaps because saying it made the situation feel more ordinary. 20 minutes until 12:17. There was no reason to believe anything would happen. The ticket could be a mistake. Someone could have made it as a joke. Perhaps someone had somehow found out her name. There had to be a reasonable explanation. Moira preferred reasonable explanations. She put the ticket beside the suitcase. Then something caught her eye. Beneath the cloth, something silver. She lifted the fabric. A necklace lay beneath it. Moira carefully picked it up. The chain was delicate. The pendant was a small silver disc, smooth and pale, with strange markings etched around its edges. They looked almost like tiny stars, or windows, or perhaps flowers. Moyra couldn't decide. She turned it over. Her breath caught. Her name was engraved on the back. Moyra Starlight. She stared. Why? The pendant gave the faintest shimmer. Moira nearly dropped it. She held it closer. Nothing. Just silver. She ran her thumb across the strange markings. The metal was warm. Again, like that suitcase. Moira looked at the clock. 12:01 a.m. She should probably put everything back. She should close the suitcase. She should report it. She should do something sensible. Instead, she found herself slipping the necklace around her neck. The pendant settled gently against her chest, and for some reason it felt right there. Moira looked toward the dark platform. Nothing had changed. The rain continued. The lamps continued to glow. The station was still empty. Everything was perfectly ordinary, except for the blue suitcase on her desk, the impossible ticket beside it, and the necklace around her neck. Moira picked up the ticket once more. There was still no destination, just her name, the date, and 12:17 on platform 9. She placed it carefully in her pocket. Then she heard the station clock begin to move. Not loudly, just one tiny click. Moira looked up. 12:07 a.m. 10 minutes. She didn't know what she was waiting for, but she knew she was waiting. And somewhere far beyond the station walls, beneath the sound of the rain, there came a distant sound. A train whistle. Moira stood still. Very still. The sound faded. The station became silent again. She looked down at the blue suitcase. For the first time, she wondered if it had really been lost. Perhaps it had. Perhaps it had simply found its way to the one place where lost things were supposed to go. And perhaps, somehow without knowing why, it had brought her along with it. Chapter 2. The train that wasn't there. The whistle faded into the distance. Moira remained standing beside the lost things desk. For several seconds, she didn't move. Then she looked at the clock. 12:08 a.m. She laughed softly. Well, this is ridiculous. She picked up the ticket. There was still no destination. No explanation. Just her name. Moira slipped the ticket into the pocket of her coat and closed the blue suitcase. She decided she was going to platform 9. Not because she believed the ticket. Not because she expected anything extraordinary. Simply because she was curious. And curiosity had always been one of the few things in her life that never seemed to leave her. She locked the Lost Things office and walked onto the platform. The rain had stopped. Water glistened across the stones beneath the lamps. Moyra checked the clock. 12:11 a.m. 6 minutes. She sat on the wooden bench. The station was completely silent. No announcements, no footsteps, no distant conversations. Even the rain had stopped. Moyra touched the pendant around her neck. It was warm, still warm. She wondered why. Then she heard something. Not the train. Something else. A faint chiming. Moyra looked down the tracks. Nothing. Ding, ding. The sound seemed to be coming from beneath the platform. She stood. The little blue bell in the suitcase suddenly came to mind. Moira frowned. She had left the suitcase in the office. At least she thought she had. She turned around, and the blue case was sitting at the far end of the platform. Moira stared. She hadn't brought it with her. She was certain of it. Yet there it was, standing upright, waiting. Moira walked toward it. As she approached, the little wheels moved. The suitcase rolled toward her. Moira stopped. "You're rather determined, aren't you?" The suitcase stopped too. She reached for the handle. This time, she didn't question it. She pulled it beside her, and the station clock moved. 12:16 a.m. Moira looked down the tracks. A faint light appeared. At first, it looked like an ordinary train. 2 white lights, then 4, then dozens. The darkness beyond platform 9 seemed to brighten. Moira heard the rails begin to hum. But something was wrong. There was no sound of an approaching engine, no rumbling, no vibration beneath her feet, only light. And then the train arrived. It slid silently into the station. Moira's mouth fell open. It was beautiful. Its carriages were deep blue, almost the same color as the suitcase. Silver lines curved along the sides. The windows glowed softly from within. There was no destination written above the doors. No railway company. No number. Nothing. The train stopped directly in front of Moira. The doors opened. Warm golden light spilled across the platform, and Moira looked at the ticket. 12:17 a.m. She looked at the train, then at the suitcase. The suitcase rolled forward, one wheel, then the other, and stopped at the door. Moira took a breath. She stepped inside. The doors closed behind her, and the train began moving. Chapter 3. The Girl in the Blue Coat. Moira expected darkness outside the windows. Instead, there were stars, thousands of them, not above her, around her. The train seemed to be traveling through an enormous sky. Moira pressed one hand against the glass. A silver moon drifted past. Then another. Then something that looked like a flock of glowing birds. She pulled away from the window. Where am I? A voice answered from behind her. That is a very good question. Moira turned. A young woman stood at the other end of the carriage. She wore a long blue coat and carried a basket filled with what appeared to be a tiny glowing flower. Were flowers? Moira stared. The woman smiled. First time? First time doing what? The woman laughed. Getting on. On the train? Yes. Moira looked around. Do you know where we're going? The woman shook her head. Not exactly. Moira frowned. That's not very reassuring. It's not meant to be. The woman walked closer. My name is Lila. Moira. I know. Moira stopped. You know my name? Lila glanced at the necklace, then at the blue suitcase. Her expression changed. Only slightly. But Moira noticed. You've seen this before? Lila shook her head. No. Then why are you looking at it like that? Because I've heard stories. About my necklace? About the kind of person who wears it. Moira looked down. What kind of person is that? Lila smiled. You'll find out. Then she walked away. Moira stared after her. Everyone in this place is incredibly unhelpful. Lila laughed. That's because you're asking questions that don't have answers yet. Moira didn't like that answer, but something about it made her smile. She sat down. The suitcase rested beside her. The train continued through the stars. Eventually, the sky outside began to change. The stars disappeared, and trees appeared. Tall silver trees. Their leaves shimmered as the train passed. Then came hills. Then rivers. Then fields covered in tiny lights. Moira watched in wonder. She had never seen anything like it. The train slowed. A sign appeared outside. Moira leaned toward the window. She could read it, but the letters seemed to change whenever she looked at them. Lila glanced over. Don't try too hard. Why? Some things here don't like being read before they're ready. Moira sat back. Of course they don't. The train slowed further. Ahead was a small station. Its lamps were shaped like flowers. The platform was surrounded by enormous trees. And beyond the platform, Moira saw lights. Hundreds of them. A village. A beautiful village nestled beneath the mountains. The train stopped. The doors opened. Lila lifted her basket. This is where I get off. Moira stood. Where is this? Lila smiled. Somewhere that needs you. Moira frowned. Why? But Lila was already stepping out of the train onto the platform. She turned once. Oh, Moira? Yes? Don't lose the things you brought with you. Then she disappeared into the crowd. Moira looked down at the suitcase. She opened it. Everything was still there. The feather, the bottle, the stone, the spoon and the bell, the silver threads and the strange necklace around her neck. She closed the suitcase. The train doors remained open. Moira stepped onto the platform. The moment her feet touched the ground, the train disappeared. Not departed, not moved, simply disappeared. Moira stood alone. The station was quiet. Ahead of her, a narrow path led towards the glowing village. She looked back. There were no tracks, no train, only grass. Moira took a slow breath. Then she pulled the blue suitcase behind her and began walking. Chapter 4. The Village Between the Hills. The path wound between enormous trees whose branches curved overhead like arches. The tiny lights floating among the leaves. Moira assumed they were lanterns. Then one landed on her shoulder. It was a butterfly. Its wings glowed pale green. Moira smiled. Hello. The butterfly lifted away. 3 more followed it. Soon dozens surrounded her. They weren't frightening. They were beautiful. Their wings made almost no sound. Moira continued walking. The path eventually opened, and there it was, the village. It wasn't like anything she had ever seen. The houses were small and round, with roofs covered in sea moss. Windows glowed warmly. Little bridges crossed narrow streams. Flowers grew everywhere. Some were enormous. Some were tiny. Some seemed to change color as Moira passed. There were creatures everywhere. Some looked almost human. Some did not. Moira saw a tiny person carrying a basket twice his size. She saw something with 4 legs and enormous ears carrying a bundle of sticks. A group of children laughed as they chased floating bubbles through the square. Nobody seemed frightened of her. In fact, they seemed relieved. A small creature hurried towards her. It had a round face, bright brown eyes, and hair that stuck out in every direction. It stopped directly in front of Moira. "You're here." Moira blinked. "Apparently?" The creature looked at the suitcase, then at Moira, then back at the suitcase. "You bought it." "I didn't exactly bring it." The creature frowned. "Then how did you get it here?" "It found me." The creature's eyes widened. "It found you." Moira nodded. The creature whispered something she couldn't understand. Then it turned and shouted, "She's here." People began looking towards the square. Moira suddenly felt self-conscious. "Who exactly am I?" The little creature looked at her. "You don't know?" "No." He smiled. "Good." "Good? That means it hasn't been spoiled." Moira sighed. "Nobody here answers questions properly." The creature laughed. "My name is Pip." "I'm Moira." "I know." Moira narrowed her eyes. "Everyone knows my name." Pip grinned. "Not everyone." Before Moira could ask what that meant, a bell rang across the village. Everyone stopped. The sound was beautiful. One clear note, then another. Pip looked toward the hills. "Oh, what?" "The evening bell." "Is that bad?" "No." He smiled. "It means someone needs help." Moira looked around. "Who?" Pip pointed towards the far edge of the village. There stood a little house beneath a tree. Its roof was covered in pale flowers. Smoke curled from its chimney. "The keeper." Moira hesitated. "The keeper of what?" Pip began walking. "The garden." Moira followed. The blue suitcase rolled quietly behind her. Neither of them noticed the tiny blue bell inside beginning to glow. Chapter 5. The garden that wouldn't grow. The little house belonging to a woman named May. She was tall and gentle with silver hair tied loosely behind her head. She smiled when Moira entered. "You came." Moira looked at Pip. Pip looked at May. May smiled. "Never mind." She led them into the garden. Moira stopped. The garden was enormous. Rows of plants stretched across the hillside. Some had enormous leaves. Others had delicate flowers, but many were wilted. May knelt beside one. "It has stopped blooming." Moira crouched beside her. "Why?" "I don't know." Moira looked around. The soil was dry in some places and too wet in others. She touched one of the leaves. It felt cold. She stood. "How long has it been like this?" 3 weeks. Moira walked through the rows. She didn't know anything about magical gardens. She didn't know anything about the land. She certainly didn't know how to save impossible plants. But something caught her attention. The soil near the far wall was darker. Moira crouched. She touched it, then looked at the plants beside it. They were healthier. What happens here? May shook her head. Nothing. Moira frowned. She looked again. There was a tiny crack in the stone wall. Water was trickling through it. She followed the crack with her eyes. It led beneath the garden. The water isn't reaching the rest of the plants. May stared. How do you know? I don't. Moira smiled. I'm guessing. Pip grinned. Moira found a small shovel. She began digging. At first, nothing happened. Then she uncovered a narrow channel beneath the soil. It was blocked by stones. Moira moved them. Water rushed through. It spread across the garden. The wilted plants began to lift. One flower opened, then another, then dozens. May covered her mouth. Pip jumped. You fixed it? Moira stared. I. She laughed. I suppose I did. She didn't notice the blue suitcase behind her. The purple stone inside it had begun to glow. Chapter 6. The Silver Feather. The next morning, Moira woke beneath a roof she didn't recognize. She sat up. For a moment, she panicked. Then she remembered the train, the village, the garden, and she smiled. Maybe it had all been a dream. Then she looked at the window. A tiny blue creature was waving at her. Moira waved back. Definitely not a dream. Pip was waiting outside. We have to go. Where? To the forest. Why? Someone lost something. Moira grabbed the blue suitcase. What? Pip looked at her. We don't know. They entered the forest. The trees were enormous. Sunlight filtered through silver leaves. Eventually, they found a creature sitting beside a stream. It had wings, but one wing was missing. Moira immediately thought of the silver feather. She opened the suitcase. The feather shimmered. The creature looked at it. Its eyes widened. Moira held it out. The moment the feather touched the creature's wing, light spread through the forest. The missing wing appeared, not as a replacement, as though it had simply been waiting to return. The creature flew. It circled around them. Moira laughed. She hadn't realized how happy she felt. Pip looked at her. You like that? Moira watched the creature disappear amongst the trees. Yes, she smiled. I really did. She didn't think much about it. Not yet. Chapter 7. The River of Glass. Days passed. Moira stopped counting them. There were always things to do. A bridge needed repairing. A child had lost something important. A strange machine had stopped working. A river had changed direction. A tiny village needed help finding its way through the forest. And every time Moira found herself trying something. Sometimes she succeeded. Sometimes she didn't. Sometimes Pip helped. Sometimes May did. Sometimes the creatures simply watched. And little by little, Moira began noticing something. She wasn't afraid of not knowing. In her old life, not knowing had made her feel lost. Here, not knowing made her curious. She began asking different questions. Not, what am I supposed to be, but what happens if I try this? One afternoon, they reached the river of glass. It was beautiful. The water was perfectly clear, so clear that the riverbed looked like polished crystal. But the river had stopped moving. Moira studied it. She noticed something. The water wasn't blocked, it was being held. A series of enormous silver reeds had grown across the river. Moira touched one. It hummed. She looked at Pip. These are musical. Pip blinked. Yes. Then perhaps they need the right song. Moira laughed. I don't know any magical songs. You don't need a magical one. Moira listened. The reeds hummed different notes. She began tapping her fingers against the wooden spoon from the suitcase. The seven-petaled flower on its handle warmed beneath her hand. She listened again. Then she tapped a different rhythm. The reeds responded. One by one, they began to sway. The river moved, slowly at first, then faster. The water sparkled. Pip stared at her. Moira stared too. I think, she smiled. I think they were waiting for someone to listen. Pip grinned. Perhaps you are good at it. Moira looked at him. She didn't answer, but she remembered his words. Chapter 8. The Door Beneath the Hill. One evening, while walking back towards the village, Moira noticed something strange. The necklace around her neck had become warm. She stopped. The pendant was glowing faintly. Pip looked at it. He became very quiet. You know what this is? No. Pip, he sighed. I know what it might be. Moira held it. Then tell me. Pip pointed towards a hill. There is a door there. Moira looked. There was nothing. Where exactly? They climbed the hill, and at the top, Moira saw a stone wall. Nothing else. She touched the pendant. The markings around its edge began glowing. She placed it against the stone. A soft sound echoed beneath the hill. The stone wall opened. Moyra stepped back. Pip stared. It really is a key. Moyra looked at the necklace. All this time? Pip nodded. What is behind it? I don't know. Moyra smiled. Finally, an honest answer. They stepped through. Inside was a room filled with shelves. Hundreds of objects rested there. Books, bottles, feathers, seats, little bells, maps, paintbrushes, tools, and things Moira couldn't even name. At the center stood a table. On it was a single letter. Moira picked it up. It was addressed to her. She opened it. Inside were only 7 words. You were never meant to find the destination. Moira read it twice. Then again. She looked at Pip. What does that mean? Pip shook his head. I don't know. Moira looked towards the shelves. For the first time since arriving, she felt a strange tug of sadness. Not because she was unhappy, because she suddenly realized she would eventually have to leave. She didn't know when, but she knew. And she wasn't sure she wanted to. Chapter 9. What Moira could do. The following days felt different. Moira began noticing things about herself. She liked making things. She liked solving problems. She liked listening. She liked helping. She liked learning. She liked looking at something broken and wondering how it might work again. She liked taking something ordinary and seeing whether it could become something more. None of these things appeared suddenly. They had always been there. She simply hadn't noticed them. One evening, May sat beside her under a tree. You've changed. Moira smiled. I think I have. Do you know what? What do you want now? Moira thought about it. Oh, no, I don't. May smiled. Good. Moira laughed. That's your answer? Sometimes knowing what you don't want is the beginning of finding what you do. Moira looked towards the village. For the first time, she didn't feel like she needed to have an answer immediately. She could discover it. She could learn it. She could try. She could fail. And she could try again. And perhaps that was enough. Chapter 10. The last night. The blue suitcase was waiting beside the village square. Moira knew what it meant. It was time. Pip hugged her. May held her hands. The winged creature from the forest flew overhead. The garden was blooming. The river was moving. The village was alive. Moira felt tears in her eyes, not sadness, something warmer, gratitude. She opened the suitcase. The objects were gone. Every one. The feather, the stone, the bottle, the bell, the spoon, the silver threads, all gone. Only the ticket remained. Moira looked at it. For the first time, she noticed something written faintly beneath the words she'd seen before. She hadn't noticed it because the ink had been nearly invisible. She held it beneath the moonlight. The words appeared. The destination was never a place, but it was within the journey. Moira stared, and suddenly she understood. The train had never been taking her somewhere. Not really. The village hadn't needed a hero. The creatures hadn't needed someone extraordinary. They had simply needed someone willing to notice, someone willing to try, someone willing to believe that perhaps something could be done even when they didn't know how. And Moira had discovered the same thing about herself. She hadn't needed to arrive somewhere to become who she was meant to be. She had needed to begin. She looked at Pip. I think I understand. Pip smiled. Then it's time. The blue suitcase closed itself. The world became bright. Moira felt the ground disappear beneath her feet. And then, silence. Chapter 11, 12:18. Moira opened her eyes. She was standing on platform 9. The rain was falling. The station's lights were glowing. The old clock hung above her head. She looked around. There was no village, no silver forest, no river of glass, no Pip, no May, and no magical train. Only Belmere Station. Moira looked at the clock. 12:18 a.m. She stood perfectly still. The blue suitcase was gone. The necklace was gone. The ticket was gone. Everything was gone. For several moments, she wondered whether she had imagined it all. Perhaps she'd fallen asleep. Perhaps a long night made her dream. Perhaps she'd simply been tired. Moira laughed softly. Of course. She turned toward the lost things office. Then she stopped. Something was sitting on her desk. A single yellow mitten. The one with the little blue bird. Moira walked toward it. She picked it up and smiled. She knew exactly what she was going to do. She would put it somewhere safe. Someone might come looking for it. Moira looked towards the great clock once more. 12:18. Her hand went instinctively to her chest. The necklace wasn't there, but she could still feel its warmth. She closed her eyes and remembered the words. The destination was never a place, but it was within the journey. Moyra finally understood. She had spent so much time waiting to discover what she was supposed to become that she had forgotten something important. She didn't have to know yet. She could try. She could learn. She could make things. She could help people. She could follow the things that made her curious. She could become good at something simply because she loved doing it. And perhaps she didn't need to find the one perfect purpose. Perhaps purpose could be built, one small discovery at a time. Moyra smiled. Then she returned to her desk. The station was still quiet. The rain still fell. The clock still ticked. Everything was ordinary again. Almost. Because from somewhere far down the empty platform came the faintest sound. Moira looked up. Nothing. She smiled. Good night. And somewhere beyond the station, somewhere beyond the tracks and the rain and the ordinary world she knew, a tiny blue bell rang. Once. Ding. Then everything was still. Moira picked up the little yellow mitten, and for the first time in a very long time, she wasn't wondering where her life was taking her. She was simply curious to find out. The end.